when we did our first advanced screening, which was basically the premiere of the movie at Beyond Fest at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood.
Right.
That's the first time we're really seeing it with an audience, like a real audience, not just a friends and family audience. And that moment killed. It killed. Like
I
everybody
bet.
got it, works, and that's Dan. I would love to say, yes, I put that Easter egg in there, and everybody, but Dan does remember every little thing, and so he lives and breathes this stuff.
Welcome back, everyone, to Kingdom of Dreams podcast and Making of Stories. I'm your host, Jawad Mir. Yes, I know I've been away. It's been kind of crazy with work and a film that I'm working on, plus just haven't had the time to get the guests on. Now we've got about 7-8 recordings already done. And today my guest is Micho Roberts, who is the writer on the most recent Predator, Killer of the Killers, the animated feature. It's an incredible film that came out on Friday. I wasn't expecting it to be that great, to be honest. I had seen the trailer, but it just blew away my expectations. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Micho Roberts for Killer of the Killers. Good to have you. How's your weekend been?
Well, it's been crazy. It's been one of the more memorable weekends of my life.
And that would be something related to what we're about to talk about, I'm guessing?
Yeah, 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 yeah. It's rare that you get just a pure critical, a good reception critically and otherwise.
That's great. Well, since you started talking about it, just run through your set of last 2 days, the reaction that you may, obviously it feels good when you hear good things on something that you've worked on creatively, but obviously for that amount of time. What kind of stuff have you seen? What have you felt? And we'll dive into the actual film itself right after that.
The same thing everybody's seeing, which is just the audience, it being a really good fit for the audience, the hardcore fans really appreciating it, and not just the hardcore fans, but general audiences as well. A lot of good critical reviews, and it's exhilarating because you spend your life wondering, can I do it? Am I ever going to be part of a movie that everybody likes and that does well and is performs well on the streaming services? And then it happens, and it validates a lot of the struggle that you put into it.
Amazing. Well, that's good to hear. So, obviously, we're talking about Killer of the Killers, the Predator new film that came on Hulu on Friday, right? June the 6th, or was it
That's,
Thursday?
yeah, it was
Right,
Friday.
Friday. And so just to kind of give you a little bit of context myself about Predator world, I saw the very first Predator when I shouldn't have watched it. I was only like 11 years old, and I've seen it so many times since then. I've seen Predator 2. I haven't seen the Alien versus Predator series just because it's not something that spoke to me even in the trailer.
Oh, you haven't even
Uh,
seen it?
no, no, I've heard terrible things about it, but I know there's a lot of fans who love it. I've seen the Predator with was it Adrian Brody one? That was pretty good.
Yeah,
That
Predators.
the
Yeah.
Predators, yeah. And those are the three that ones. Those are the three films that I like. And when the trailer came out for Killer of the Killers, I think around the same time the Badlands trailer came out too, which comes out in November. I mean, I love animation, and it did speak to me. Like the trailer did speak to me, but I had absolutely no idea. Number one, I don't know why I thought it was a mini series. That's the gist that's the sense that I got from the trailer. But then when I started watching it, and as it, how it's without revealing anything, it has these chapters, and when it goes from chapters to chapter, and especially at the end of first chapter and beginning of second, there was that wow moment, like, okay, what just happened, right? And I absolutely loved it. Now I have an anamorphic monitor. I literally just watched it on that yesterday morning, and yeah, bravo.
Oh, thank you.
Really,
Really glad.
really well written, which is something that we're here to talk about, of course, because you co-wrote it, if I'm not mistaken, or you are the main.
I wrote it. I have sole writing credit, but I co-wrote the story with Dan.
Mm. That's right. You co-wrote the story, but you wrote the script, and yeah, the animation, the sound, the music, everything was just bang on. So congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. It feels good. I mean, everybody was rowing in the same direction, and there wasn't a lot of backtracking, or we didn't stall out. So it was just one of these. I don't want to call it a happy accident, because the whole thing was intentional, but it's rare when you're working on a movie that you don't have some type of crisis moment where everybody goes, "Oh, what the fuck are we doing right now? We need to
Mm,
restart steps." And even great movies have that experience, but this one, everybody kind of got it, and there was lots of revisions and things, but all those changes were kind of within the four walls of what we all set out to do in the first place. So our energy was well spent, I think, on it. And yeah, I mean, I'm really glad it came together the way it did, and really glad the audiences are responding to it.
yeah, and another Predator movie which I forgot, Prey, which I absolutely
Yeah,
love
I
too.
was gonna ask. I'm like,
Right, yeah,
wait, wait, definitely.
no, I totally forgot. I mean, um, yeah, it's an amazing film too, and it's when did you start writing this? I'm just curious because I'm going to ask you. Actually, I shouldn't ask you that. So I read a comment yesterday. I watched the Prey trailer again, and I
Yeah,
went, you go into the comments. I think it was in 2022, I'm like to guess, or
yeah.
21, but likely 2022. And it said it'd be really cool if the Predator universe explores different time periods and different cultures. And and I had a smile on my face when I read that because I had already seen the film that you worked on, and that's what's so incredible about it. But to me, the thing that stood out the most, especially in chapter two, I would say, in chapter one, two, was the lack of dialogue,
Yeah.
and that is not easy thing to do, and to be able to convey what you want to convey. So yeah, I felt like I was watching a Quentin Tarantino film because of the chapters and right and
That's always Dan's. That's from a structural standpoint. That's how Dan thinks of it, as Pulp Fiction. You know.
yeah. And I thought about it because I'm in the industry too, and I thought about it. I'm not going to reveal anything, but I think you will understand what I'm saying is that if it was not chapters, right? If it was like a basically back and forth, for the lack of a better word, how would you feel? Like how would the audience take it? And I don't think it would be received really, really well
Wait,
because
just so I understand the hypothetical, it would be you would be
well,
cutting in between the stories. Is that what
yeah,
you're?
yeah, back and forth, right? And I think and the reason I say that is because I was watching this interview. I wasn't watching. I was speaking to the editor of Megalopolis, who worked on Francis Ford Coppola's Megalopolis, and he was telling me a story that how Francis Ford Coppola, and it ties into this Godfather Part Two. They had a screening, and the audience didn't like it. They hated it. And Francis Ford Coppola was like freaking out. He went underneath his bed trying to figure out what the hell have I done wrong.
Always
And
freaking out.
yeah, right? Francis Ford Coppola, of all the people. And I think it was him, he had the revelation, or him and his editor had a revelation that they realized that the timelines from past and present, the Robert De Niro and Al Pacino, they were cutting in back and forth way too quickly.
Mm,
So what they did was they extended each period by 10 minutes. So each period was about 20 minutes long, and it did the trick. And
yeah.
I think that's exactly what happened for me, at least in this series, in this film too, similarly. But anyways, I mean a lot about that. I just want to
No,
point
but
that
I
out.
do think that when you just thinking about Godfather 2, especially the love story in Italy, you have to. You could have gotten away, I think, with cutting a little bit more with the Robert De Niro thing, although it plays perfectly the way it is. But you need to let that story of his romance
Yeah.
develop, climax, and then have a tragic ending. All you need to be there with that, to really feel that, and the sense of being. I mean, here we are talking about Godfather too, but the sense of being in exile, the sense of, and even just the colors, the light in Italy versus New York City, and
Yeah.
um, so that makes a lot of sense. And I think, to your point, that's why it does work in our structure, is that we're putting you into a whole new world, and we're hoping, and the thing that I'm proud of, and that everyone's commenting on, is that we are able to create a little mini movie and a little universe unto itself before we move to the next chapter. And so I think, yeah, the thing that I am proud of that we've done a good job with is like we've achieved an epic sweep on a very, very scant runtime. I mean, it's not 90 minutes, it's like 84 minutes. I mean, there you could talk about the credit sequence and the post credit
Yeah,
moment.
yeah.
But yeah, I mean that so and the beauty of that is it's just if we just were constrained with the budget. I mean, people say like, oh, it's animation and you can do whatever you want, and that's kind of true, but we had to make choices really quickly, really early for it to have time to cook and for the artists and the animators to really get that right. So a lot of things we didn't really have a chance to go back and do do-overs. Um, so anyway.
Yeah, no, that's phenomenal, man. I mean, we'll dive into it a little bit more afterwards, but what I would love to know is that, so I went through your credits, right? And
Yeah.
obviously, IMDb sometimes is not accurate, so please correct me. I think you were a development executive on some of the Sharknado movies.
Yeah, the
Um,
first the
and,
first ones. Yeah.
yeah, and then I think it was some kids shows or kids movies. I forget the Jurassic something. It was called Jurassic.
Yeah, I don't we I started claiming that development executive credit and because it's not a real, I mean it's not in the
I know. Yeah.
studio executives don't get that, but I'm like, damn it, I need something to show for myself in this department here. So I have many, many more of those credits that didn't show. I don't know why the ones that did do, but yeah, I worked at the Asylum, which was a direct to when I started direct to DVD, but basically a B movie studio that does low budget independent films.
Yeah.
And so my IMDb is filled with low budget independent filmmaking. Um,
So which is fine. It's a great journey. I know when you're traveling through that journey, it's probably sometimes not as fine, because like you said earlier, that finally the hard work kind of paid off. It's like obviously the first step, but then and then you worked on this, which is like one of the biggest franchises that needed some sort of reboot, which kind of did from Prey. But how did you get onto this and start working with Dan? Just run through that story to me. How were you
yeah,
familiar with the Predator world, or?
yeah, I was. I mean, I was as familiar as anybody, but the origin of me working on this movie, it really actually goes back to the beginning of my filmmaking, where the way that my career has kind of ended up is it's been a series of collaborative friendships that, you work together and then down the road, people recommend you for things and help you out. So in my case, um, the producer of Killer of Killers, Ben Rosenblatt, who's really instrumental in the whole thing. I mean, the whole idea of Dan directing two movies in 1 year, he could never have done it without Ben Rosenblatt. And Ben Rosenblatt's he's the type of person who he can see around the corner and he can see how all the pieces are going to come together and before anyone else does. And he'll push people along into that frame. And that's what happened with me. So he was working with Dan. So Ben and I we met as freshmen in college at Michigan State. Um,
Mm,
and we made student films together. We made two feature films. Those are not on my IMDb because this was long before,
sure.
professional career. But we made two feature films and did okay. We won the local film festival doing that. And then he moved out to Hollywood. He encouraged me to move out to Hollywood. So we always had this idea of working together. And then in 2018, I left the Asylum and started working with Ben on different projects. And so part of the story of IMDb is that it never tells you the whole story because there's people who work all the time who have very few credits.
Yeah.
And so for me, like we made a couple different series that we tried to pitch and get made that never got made. And so he and I had been working together for a minute when he started working with Dan on Prey, and he kind of helped them out on Prey. And then there were some friends and family screenings that they invited me to, and I just started giving my feedback on the rough cut of Prey and then the further iterations. And credit to Dan, I mean, he really kind of appreciated my perspective and kept bringing me back to these screenings to give notes. And when this movie percolated, so the concept before I was hired, the concept was just Viking, samurai, World War II pilot, and then secretly the arena at the end. Um, and Ben knew me not just as the, B movie Asylum guy, but also like for years I've been trying to get into epic historical action. Like that's the genre that I always wanted to work in. You
Mm-hmm.
can't do that when you're working on monster movies and disaster movies and everything else, lifetime movies. But that's been my ambition. And so because I love history, like a lot of people, it's funny because a lot of people they would assume, it's like, oh, you got to be a film nerd. And I'm a filmmaker nerd, but I'm not a film nerd the way that I am a history nerd. And
Mm,
so I brought that perspective to this project. And also
right.
having worked on Asylum and having worked on so many genre movies, I have a real sense of like what is it when you're making a genre movie. So the audience has a certain amount of has a relationship to the genre and they have expectations for what they want out of the genre movie. And the thing that I learned is that you have to meet those expectations. The number one priority is giving the audience what they want, and even if that means they didn't know they wanted it, but you have to give them the goods. And I think a lot of times filmmakers overthink it and they want to put a little twist on it and put a little mustard on it, but like you just have to deliver the goods, and that's what the audience is there for.
Yeah. I mean, for me, yes, it's the Predator universe. Yes, the historical parts that you mentioned. Yes, the animation is great. Everything is great. But again, it always comes back to the story and the relationships, right? Like it's in the Viking, it's the mother and son. In the World War II, it's the father and son slash, son, a soldier and his senior officer. And then in the Japanese one, it's basically two guys trying to compete for the same thing, and that that's what makes it amazing. Like I'm sure you have too. You've seen some incredible stuff production wise, like budgets and all that, but the story lacks or it's not that strong. But that's what I love, especially for me. The second chapter was my favorite. I mean, just because I said earlier, and it's just yeah, it's incredible, man. Like I was literally not expecting it because of so many disappointments in the Predator world,
Yeah.
but I love the Prey and I love this. So yeah, let's talk about the actual series. Let's talk about the film in a little bit more detail. What was it that moment where you felt, before it even got into production, that in terms of story and script that you've got something like that personally for you? We all have those feelings most of the time, but was there something different and special that you felt that you got something special?
Um, yeah, and those feelings when you do have them, they are kind of fleeting, unfortunately. And so
Hmm.
having that feeling at all is a great experience. And but I think the moment for me was at well, shout out to the production designer Amy Carter, who she was the one who first kind of put that wind in my sails because I'm the type of a lot of writers are this way. We're kind of needy and neurotic, and even if we're doing a great job, we see the problems, we see the bullshit. It's hard to feel genuinely like proud of yourself, you know. And
True.
and
That's
working on the team, day in and day out, because it really is. It's just like constantly iterating, constantly going back and forth. Nobody on the team is going to stop and go. I mean, once here and there, good job. Hey, nice new scene. I love this new
yeah.
scene. But you don't get that global like pat on the back of like you're
Which is
really
why you're making it. Which is why you're making it for one of
right.
many reasons, right?
But I remember the production designer who I didn't meet because a lot of this is done remotely. I
Yeah.
hadn't met her yet, but she sent an email to the producer saying like, I just got to tell you, I really love this Ursa character, and I love this script, and I felt touched by that. And I'm like, oh, maybe I am doing something good here. And the real moment though was at our very first Friends and Family test screening when the a lot of the animation isn't done, a lot of the sound isn't done. People come in and they give feedback, and we screened it into this room. And granted, they were friends and family and coworkers, whatever, but it just worked. It worked from the beginning. And so that gave us the confidence to keep pushing and to keep refining and to keep making it even better. And that's where you want to be. It's kind of like, I don't know if you play golf. I don't really play golf, but the game of
Here and
golf.
there.
So here and there is enough. Same. It's really whether you're writing drafts of a script or you're making cuts of a film. It's a lot like golf, where you want your shot off the tee to get as close to the green, if not on the green, as possible. You don't want to shank it. You don't want to have to go looking in the weeds for it. And on this movie, we our first shot, we got it onto the green, and then it was just a matter of putts. And so that's kind of part of why it worked.
Nice. And how much did you go back and watch all of the Predator movies or some of them? Because I love um, the reference to Predator 2, which I'm not going to reveal that you had in there, which was pretty neat because I've seen that scene so many times, the reference that I'm talking about.
Right.
So when that happened in your film, I literally paused it. I went to YouTube and I wanted to make sure that it was the exact same
Yeah,
thing.
and
And lo and
fill in the
yeah,
blank. I guess we're not spoiling anything.
I'm
I will
I'm not
say,
saying anything. I'll let you say if you
I'll
want
just,
to.
I think I know what you're talking about. In that moment, that was another moment. I mean, it was the there was all these signposts of like, yeah, this is working, and the devil's advocate in me kept finding reasons to think maybe it's not working.
Yeah,
But then when we did our first advanced screening, which was basically the premiere of the movie at Beyond Fest at the Egyptian Theater in Hollywood,
right.
that's the first time we're really seeing it with an audience, like a real audience, not just a friends and family audience. And that moment killed. It killed. Like
I
everybody
bet.
got it. It works. And that's Dan. I would love to say, yes, I put that Easter egg in there and everybody, but Dan, you talked about like rewatching things. Like I needed to rewatch them all. I needed to, like, I have to constantly refresh, my brain, because my brain remembers a lot of the history, but like I have to rescreen the movies. I'm not going to remember every little thing. But Dan does. Dan does remember every little thing, and so he lives and breathes this stuff. I mean, the key to Dan, I think, is that, and the reason why you talked about the comment in the underneath the prey that you
Yeah.
watched, and you know, I don't think he's going around poaching. And also, this idea, it's not that creative. I mean, it is creative, and
Oh
I
no,
think it's
no,
a great
that's not
idea.
what I
But
was
no,
suggesting.
I know
Yeah.
it's not what you're suggesting. My point is just that Dan is the audience. Dan is the film nerd. He gets it, and that's why it's easy to row in the same direction, because Dan's steering that ship.
And that's exactly what I meant is that having this ability to know what the audience wants. Because until I saw this yesterday, it finally hit me. Because you have Predator 1, Predator 2, then you've got a bunch of Predator films, and you got Alien versus Predator. And there was always like every time they come out and they just tank, right? They don't do well critically and commercially. And it finally hit me. I'm like, why they haven't been trying different worlds? Because that's all it was. Like, you're trying to throw into the same like Earth and same thing happening over and over again, and nothing seems different. And that's what made the shift with Prey as well as this.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, Prey. It was so smart on so many levels to do Native American versus Predator,
Yeah,
because and that framework and the latent potential in that premise is part of what sparked my approach to Killer of Killers, which is that you know there's a tendency to think about as separate silos the world building, the character development, and the plot. But what you want to do is combine those threads to the point where they're indistinguishable from one another. You can't have this world without these characters. You can't have these characters without this world. You can't have this story without the, blah blah blah. And part of what I tried to bring to it is not just saying, yeah, 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 history, history, whatever, whatever, but really thinking about where in time and what was going on in the world of these particular Vikings. What's their backstory? What are the cross currents of culture? And I think, and same with the Japanese chapter, same with the World War II chapter. That in some ways Torres is like America itself. Kind of new to the war at this point, 1942, kind of has something to prove, has all the panache, has all the, the stuff, but kind of untested in battle at that point. And so bringing all of those forces and viewing the characters with that perspective, I think is what makes it work as well.
Yeah. No, absolutely. And I know this is like it's a question that if somebody asked me, I would probably like, it's not the right question, but I have to ask anyway. Um, what chapter slash character did you enjoy writing the most? And maybe if there is some, not favorite is not the right word, that you could relate to more?
Mm. Um, that's a good question. That is a good question. And I think enjoyment is interesting because, and I'm not I guess I'm a little bit filibustering, but enjoyment's interesting because the things that work the best aren't always the most fun.
Yeah.
Um, and the things that are the most fun don't always work the best. I mean, in this case, luckily, according to most people, everything seems to work. So we did get it that far. I will say that I nerded out the most and had the most fun with the first chapter, the Viking chapter,
Mm-hmm.
where um, we're telling a story of someone who has been exiled from their home and from everything they love and has lived this life on the seas as a Viking raider, and he's now returning to that home. And this is all very real in the history, actually, of what we call Russia today, is that it was founded by Viking raiders,
Mm.
even Rus. So Ursa herself is a fictionalized character, but the Kievan Rus were kind of, Vikings get a lot of credit for being like badass warriors, which they are, but they're underrated as commercial, traders. Um, they found like Arabian, dinar, coins in Scandinavian graves because the reach of the trading empire was that. So blah blah blah. But all which is to say, you have all this history coming to a point, and then this one character is avenging her dad's death. And it's also, frankly, like the brutality of that violence and the ethnic cleansing of that violence gives it a gravity and a seriousness that made it fun for me. Now, the one that was more tricky, one of the ones, I mean, the arena was tough because we had to figure out the tone of it and get that right. And also, there wasn't the World War II was tough for a different reason. But you talk about the samurai ninja chapter, and that was interesting for me. I had the most fun writing that story. So like the just PDF non-script format, like the way that screenwriting works, and this way I do it, is you write a treatment, you write the story in prose
Yep.
form, and then once you have that, then you start doing it in script format with dialogue and action description. So the sword, um, this that was the cleanest in terms of notes. I turned in a draft, and he was pretty much like, "Fuck, that's it." Great job. And now, of course, that wasn't the end of the story. We did more iterations, but I knocked that one out of the park, so to speak, from the beginning relative to Dan. But then what was tough is the dialogue. So I've written all kinds of dialogue in that chapter, many, many drafts where the father has, talks to them and yells at them, and the sons are arguing. But there was something about when we were making the fight sequence between the two brothers up in that, room, there kept being these moments where it was like, okay, pause, insert dialogue here. And I'm like, how dare you? What are you going to do? And like at a certain point, I don't remember whose idea it was. It certainly wasn't mine. They were like, what if we just tried it without dialogue? You know? And I was down for that because I wasn't nailing it with the dialogue at that point. Um, and the only trepidation that I did have was that, there is a trope, of like Asian characters not getting dialogue. And
Mm.
luckily we pulled it off. So nobody's upset about that. But that was something I worried about. But other than that, it does work better. It does tell the story better. And in a way, it the framework that I built about these two brothers struggling in a battle of succession, it worked so well that I was like working against it by trying to refine it further in the form of cute dialogue, you know. Um,
Yeah.
and so that was a tougher one to write in the script form, you know. And you never know. You never know what's when you're going to like. You never know if the hurdles you run into are stop signs or if they are catapults. I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, no, it does. It does, and it's the dialogue part that you talked about, right? It's like it's if somebody's going to get offended or not, and somebody always will get offended, but I do think that each of those chapters reflect the certain times and certain culture in a proper way because Japanese, if you watch overall, they're very well cultured people. They're not, I hate to say it, but North Americans are more obnoxious than Japanese are, but and sorry.
no question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So which shows in the World War II part, right? And then you have the Vikings, which is more kind of like a Shakespearean feel and all that. So it clearly shows, and I think that's something you guys pulled off really fabulously. And what you said you're a history nerd, but did you go to Japan? Did you go to maybe U.S. Navy ships or the military just to get a sense, or even like, similar to have that feel of it in the whatever part of the world in terms of the Viking, obviously it's not there, but just going in that area or feeling it. Did you do any of that, or was it just pure your history nerd
Just
knowledge?
research, just reading and watching things that have been done. And yeah, I did not go to Japan for this. I would have loved to. I would have loved if they next movie, maybe they'll pay me to go visit places, to
Wait,
breathe the air of these places. But yeah.
but you did a fabulous job as well as Dan, without having to be physically there. You took us all there. And
Yeah.
that's brilliant. And that's absolutely brilliant because I felt
And
like I,
and the art too. I mean, a lot of the what Amy Carter brought to it, but also of course Josh and the team at Third Floor, like they were very specific about exactly what type of structure we were building and what the cultural artifacts would be in that setting. How does the funeral pyre physically look in that tradition that they were practicing in? And so, everybody adds a little bit more
of
authenticity to it.
course,
And part of
yeah,
the authenticity, the feeling of authenticity, part of it is a mirage. And that's what I love about filmmaking is that if you can hook people in enough with the characters and the story, they believe the truth of what you're doing, even if it's not
100%.
objectively real. But yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, that's why Tarantino is amazing at what he does because his characters are just so rich and detailed. And it, I've seen, I don't know how. So, there's the Alien franchise now, which is kind of getting a reboot in a similar way as Predator did with a series coming out, Alien Earth. Terminator had its own animation series. I spoke to the composers last year. I think it was called Terminator Zero, which was really well received and well done too. And now you have, the Predator in the animation realm. Do you see, even if there are plans or no plans, of that world meeting the alien world in this similar type of animation?
Um, I Let me put it this way. I could certainly see it. I can't really talk about what the plans are
Yeah, yeah.
because the ones that I am privy to, I'm not supposed to talk about, and the ones I'm not privy to, I don't know what to talk about. So there's only so much I can say about the future, but it is all being considered and being cooked.
That's good. And the way this film ended, obviously it's an open ending, again, not revealing anything. And then after the post credits, there's a small element there too, which was really cool to see. Um, Aside from whether, and I know there is already something being in the works, especially after the success of this film. Whether you know it or not, would you like to continue working on in this world and also maybe possibly explore the alien world?
I would, I would. I'll say that. Yeah, I definitely would. Yeah.
Great. Got it. What's anything else that you're working on now that you're able to discuss, or a personal project that you want to get off the ground?
Yeah, thanks for asking. That's a good question. What the thing I'm working on that's a little bit further along the tracks, we haven't sold it yet, but I'm writing and have written a biopic about Michael Flatley, who is the Lord of the Dance, who created Riverdance.
Oh, right, of course.
Yeah, so that one is exciting because even though it seems like it's a completely different genre, there's a lot of, and it is a completely different genre, but the same approach and the same spirit imbues those. So if you like the fight sequences of Killer versus Killers, wait till you see the dance sequences of Dance Lord. And I know that sounds cheeky, but like I genuinely feel that way because the same attitude and approach informs both. So I'm excited. I hope we can sell that quickly now that we've had this other success and get that onto the big screen. And we are going to hopefully get that onto the big screen. Further down the line, I have a spec that I'm really, really passionate about, and it is more in line with the historical epic action. It's called the Battle of Christiana, and it's basically the most important story in American history that most people don't know about. And this is the story of an escaped slave, William Parker, who, in defiance of the Fugitive Slave Act of 1851, forms a local militia of escaped and freed Black people, and they violently stop some kidnappings and they kill a slave owner. I'm giving away the whole plot, but
That's fine, man. That sounds very interesting. I'm already
yeah,
hooked.
so they kill this slave owner, and it starts this trial. And this is not a courtroom movie, but there is a courtroom case at the end of it where basically a northern all white jury acquits these people who were involved in this riot of the charge of treason, because the Southerners were saying, "Hey, like you can't just disobey the fugitive slave law; you have to return a property. And if you're going to fight us when we come to take our property, well, then we're going to have to secede from the Union." And so this is really the inflection point that started the Civil War. So what is this movie? It's The Black Braveheart, and it's a true story. And we haven't seen it before, and people don't know about it. So I would love to get that made. That's an uphill climb because it's going to be a bigger budget. I mean, there's probably ways to do it more cheaply, but it's a good old fashioned historical epic with a lot of gnarly violence, as people have come to love in Killer of Killers, and deep resonant themes and human characters. And so if you're listening, let's have a meeting. Let's make this movie. We can do it. But yeah.
No, that's amazing, man. I'm fascinated by both. Riverdance is something I grew up with. I remember I used to watch
Cool.
it. I think it used to come on Sundays here in Canada. And that seems very, very fascinating. So looking forward to that. And then obviously the Black Braveheart. Obviously that's not the title, but just to
The
kind of put a
Battle of
reference.
Christiana, which it could change, but
Yeah, yeah,
call
yeah,
it the Battle
yeah.
of Christiana. You
It
know.
sounds very interesting too because it didn't remind me of Braveheart, even though that's true. It reminded me of this film, which I highly recommend that you watch. It's called Bandit Queen.
Ooh, okay.
It came out in the late 90s. It's based on a true story. It was made in India and it generated. Do you know who Shekhar Kapoor is?
I don't.
He directed Elizabeth with Kate Blanchett.
Oh, yes, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so before made that, I mean, he's made few really well made films in India, but the one that really caused controversy was this because it's based on a true story of a woman called Poolan Devi, which Devi means like God. And she was raped and, family was tortured and everything, and she turns into this like a leader of rebellion and, basically trying to save people. It's a great story and it's a great film. It's not in the court, but when you talked about violence, it's very brutal. It's very, very explicit. Um, that kind of connected with that story. So just putting that out there, if
Yeah,
you like
definitely.
watching something like that, it's highly recommendable. No, that's awesome, man. I'm really stoked about Alien Earth, which I know you have nothing to do with, at least to my knowledge. But I'm also stoked about the way this film ended, and it just left me with wanting more, which is a feeling that I like to invoke in in my films, and I like to watch. A lot of people don't like open-ended films, the way they end, but this I genuinely loved, and thank you so much. Everything, even I downloaded the soundtrack because I've grown up listening to Elvin Silvestri's soundtrack from the original film. It's never been released, but I somehow got the bootleg version of it 25 years ago, and I still have it. So so listening,
That's what's great about this score. It strikes such a good balance of, so
it
many.
does.
I was just rewatching the first Predator the other day, and it's like so many of the cues are the same, and in a good way, and that it's iterative, but it's also keeps that DNA. And I think that's the tricky part about a franchise like this is that there's a temptation to stray from the core because you don't want to be
Yeah.
just rehashing the old thing. So it's how do you make it new but the same? And
And
that's
that did Joe perfectly. That it was really well put out in this series. Um, I mean, other you talked about similarities. I don't know if you listen to scores. I mean, that's my thing. Like that's all I listen to is movie scores. If you listen to certain cues in Back to the Future soundtrack and certain cues in Predator because it's the same composer, and maybe even in Forrest Gump a little bit, you'll find overlap.
little touches. Yeah.
Yeah, like you feel like you're watching one or the other. So it's I just thought I'd bring it up because I noticed these things because I listened to it. But yeah, no, the score for this film is incredible too. So looking forward to Badlands. Are you involved in that?
No. I did give some feedback at a recent screening. So I have seen a cut of Badlands, but I'm not officially involved. They're like one thing at a time, bro. Um,
Yeah,
but
yeah.
but no, yeah, it's it's gonna continue the mind blowing experience of Killers for sure. Um,
Amazing, man. I'm looking forward to it. I'm really looking forward to it. Yeah, and looking forward to your work too. Thank you so much for your time.
yeah, thanks for having me.
Anything you want to add at the end?
Well, just
Like,
that it was very generous of you when you talked about how obnoxious North Americans are. I'm like, well, some North Americans are more obnoxious than others, and they tend to reside south of the 48th parallel. But I hear you. I appreciate it.
I mean, it's just one of those things. Yeah, I mean, the Japanese culture is totally different, right? And but I know what you mean, and I wasn't trying to be politically correct. It's just one of those things where I do, as storytellers, and it's like a curse that I feel, at least I have. It's like when you empathize too much, sometimes you can overlook something that is right there in front of you, but you're trying to empathize. It's a good thing and a bad thing too, and that's something that I run into sometimes, but it
Oh,
is
and
what it is.
you're just being empathetic and generous when you might be ignoring the monster on your door.
No, it's not that. It's just, in stories you have to do that, I think, right?
Yeah.
You don't want to fall in like if you look at some of the great films, I know we're sidetracking, but if you look at some of the great films like The Godfather, Schindler's List, Munich, I don't know if you've seen that, another
Yeah, yeah.
Spielberg movie, wherever there's a strong antagonist, that makes the film very much interesting. I mean, even what you wrote, it's if the antagonists weren't strong, why would anybody care about the protagonists? So
You have to be terrified of the antagonist, and
right, and then also
you have
be
to
able
doubt
to
that you're. Yeah.
yeah, also be able to know the antagonist. Like if you just paint somebody that, they're somebody is like a Muslim terrorist or a black guy is like a gang member, a white guy is a supremacist. Like if you just label those things and you don't show any context behind it, sometimes that the audience doesn't connect with it from a time like it doesn't remain timeless. That's how I look at it.
Right. And when you look at you talk about like American History X, where you are empathizing. I mean, even like I don't know if this is a random reference, but I don't know if you've seen the movie Little Children. And it's just basically it gets you to empathize with this child molester, and
Okay, I've
and
heard about it. I haven't seen it. Yeah.
and then I'm going to spoil it. Well, I won't spoil
Don't
it, but
don't spoil it.
suffice it,
Don't spoil it.
suffice it to say, I'm with you. That's to me when you're dealing in the gray, and you have heroes who are capable of committing atrocities, and then you have villains who are capable of being sympathetic. That's interesting, and
Yeah.
um, that's good
That's what we
stories.
do. That's what we do. That's what great storytelling is, 100%. Awesome, man. I appreciate your time. I would love to have you on again whenever your next project kicks off, or at least close to being wrapped up. Looking forward to everything that you're working on. I wish you nothing but the best in the head of your career, and it's even though I know you've been at it for a long time, but this is the first step in a long, many great steps that you'll have for sure.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's good to hear. Thank you.